One of the things that you talk about in the book is the similarities. Now, once you unpack the Democratic Party from the perspective that you unpacked it, you start seeing the similarities between the Democratic and the Republican Party, which they're essentially both two opposite sides of the same coin, the coin of
Yeah.
neoliberalism. So unpack that a little bit, and then I want to tie it into where the party is going now that there is no viable Republican Party.
Yeah. Well, God, that's isn't that just a mind blowing subject right there?
Yeah.
But let's go back to the history of this thing, okay? Because it's an easy thing to write a book that's just a catalog of the Democrats' failures, like all the different ways that they screwed up over the years, all the different ways that they sold out their base and they betrayed. This demographic and that, and this part of their constituency and that, and there's many examples, and they're all in there, or a lot of them are in there, but that's not good enough. What I wanted to do in Listen Liberal was to explain why they do this and
Mm.
come up with a consistent theory for it. And you can find it when you start to dig, because the Democrats have actually been over the years, over the decades, have been pretty open about why they do the things that they do. And it
Mm.
goes back to the early 70s when they decided that, and this is during the Vietnam War, after the 68 convention, you've got the kids in the street fighting with the Chicago police, all this kind of thing is going on. And the Democrats decided that they wanted to make a break with their traditional constituent groups. They wanted to make a break with who they had been in the past. And they decided they didn't really want to be the party of organized labor anymore.
Right.
And this is not something that they did secretly. This is something that it was much discussed at the time. And it's also something that is easy to understand because a lot of unions back then were, big, hulking, slow moving, very white, very top heavy, or not particularly democratic organizations that
Hmm.
supported President Johnson on the Vietnam War. And so the Democrats are saying, look, this is kind of we want to be identified with a different group that's much more progressive, much more liberal, and that's what they call the affluent white collar suburbanites or white collar professionals
Hmm.
is what they call them. And they said, and they were very open about this. This is who we wanted. They wanted to identify the party with instead. This is this very admirable group, and you can really understand why they made that decision in those days, in the late 60s and early 70s. The idea that working people would soon be, just have their fortunes completely ruined for them by the global economy. That wasn't even on the radar screen back then.
Mm. Okay.
Working people were doing really well back then. They were in the middle class, that kind of thing. The idea that the economy that deindustrialization would overtake huge parts of the Midwest, and that's all the things that have happened. None of that was on the radar screen back then. So they did this, I think, in good conscience. But they've stuck with it over the years and over the years and over the years and over the years, and now we're in a very different situation.
Hmm.
And where working people, the working class generally, is watching their way of life,
Disappear.
disintegrate.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party doesn't really give a damn. Instead, they scold these people.
Yeah.
Open up the New York Times and read Tom Friedman. They scold these people, and say you should have gone to college, and maybe you did go to college, but you didn't study the right subject, or
Exactly.
you didn't get a STEM degree or whatever it is. You're not in an innovative industry. It always goes back to being your own fault. But what I trace in Listen Liberal is the Democrats, when they embraced this new constituency, the affluent white collar professionals, when they embraced this new group, they embraced an entire theory of politics, an entire way of looking at the world. And it's the word that you just used before, which I don't like to use, but it's neoliberalism.
Hmm.
It's what they call it in England. And but we all know what that means. They embraced what they call globalization, high tech, what they call creative industries, but above all, industries that employ professionals. And so you go down the list of the industries that Democrats really admire: Silicon Valley,
Right.
big pharma, but above all, the answer: Wall Street,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And when they and this begins, their sort of love affair with Wall Street begins during the Clinton years. Clinton, by the way, was one of the greatest most people most dedicated to this sort of theory of politics, where it's
Right.
all about the professional class. That's who he was. One of his cabinet secretaries, Robert Reich, who's actually a very good guy now, but had actually written a whole book about this subject.
Hmm.
And Clinton reached out to Wall Street, and the whole theory there is that Wall Street is one of these creative industries. It employs these very sophisticated, highly educated people with advanced degrees.
Hmm.
It's people just like us.
Hmm.
It's people just like the people at the top of the Democratic Party. And that's the story. It's their love affair with this group of people, this people at the very top, at the very pinnacle of American society,
Hmm.
who the Democrats have come to love. And so it's a kind of liberalism of the rich,
Mm.
is the way I always put it. And I'm sorry, I talk way too much. I mean, you got me going there, and I just can't. Sometimes I can't stop, and I
No.
know I need to shut up so that you can answer.
No. It's
You,
fine. I trust me. If my audience was getting disengaged, I would know by now. So feel free. they would have let me know. This is very interactive. So you're getting some great feedback already. So
okay.
feel free to go in. But let's drill down a little bit further. Then, so they pulled this off in the late '60s, early '70s. They carry it through to fruition. And now we're at this point where I'm calling it like the final form of the DLC. Like it's the truncating of the bigoted class, whatever you want to call them, those who won't ever agree on social issues on the right. And
Yeah.
then they're shedding. We see Hillary Clinton is doing an intentional, in my opinion, shedding of the progressive left. And what you're left with is this centrist party that embraces globalization, Wall Street, and they happen to be socially liberal. And I just didn't expect it to
Exactly.
happen so quickly, but thanks to Trump,
Yeah,
thanks to
yeah.
Trump, it seems like
Trump
it's
has
been
made all these things possible, hasn't he? Well,
exactly. Go
they
ahead.
have the Democrats had a saying back in the '90s. I don't know if the Democrat who came up with this saying, but if you go back and look at newspaper headlines from the early days of the Clinton administration, they had this saying that people, these different constituent groups on the left of the Democratic coalition, had nowhere else to go.
Right.
And there's two places in particular where you see this. One is, do you remember the Sister Souljah moment?
Oh yeah. Hell
Remember
yeah.
this
Absolutely.
when Clinton contrived to insult Jesse Jackson to his face
Yep.
in front of the TV cameras of the nation, and that was all the newspaper columnists were like, well, he can do that because they've got nowhere else to go. And then the year that was '92, the next year Clinton got NAFTA passed over the
Yep.
objections of organized labor, and he just ran the bulldozer over these guys,
Yeah.
with his right hand man Rahm Emanuel
Yep.
was, and the other one Bill Daley, the Chicago
Chicago.
guys
Yep.
were the ones that got this thing done. And again, all the newspaper columnists were like, well, so what? They've got nowhere else to go.
Mm.
And that's Hillary Clinton is looking at people like that again, and that's the logic. Look,
Yeah.
that is always what they do, and they will do that forever. I mean, even as they were talking about how much they loved working people, there were all of these Wall Street people there in Philadelphia throwing these, I imagine, very extravagant parties.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, it,
It was
it's
obscene.
always the way it goes with these guys.
The parties and the price tags for the parties were rather obscene, and they were all being hosted by someone from Wall Street. It was quite perverse. So now that sentiment is there, right? They've been using that for a very long time. You have nowhere else to go.